There's an old proverb that goes back centuries which states, "Human beings are given but one life to live." So we here that inhabit this mortal coil must make the best out of the time that we've got. However, what if this one basic statement of fact was suddenly turned on its head and a man could live more than one lifetime? Now, it sounds almost too fantastic to contemplate, yet that is the very subject of tonight's inquiry. What if a man did have the chance to live his life over again, or at least give off the impression that he had more than one lifetime at his disposal? Ladies and gentlemen, we present to you the strange and very disturbing case of one Clarence Roberts.
Nestled in the middle of the American heartland is the small town of Nashville, Indiana. In the early 1970s, it boasted a population of less than 1,000, and its residents were known as quiet and hard-working. It was the type of town where everyone knew everyone else, and hardly the place you'd expect to find a perplexing mystery of this caliber. Two of its mainstays were Clarence and Geneva Roberts, a middle-aged couple who, by all means, liked to live the high life. Clarence was a self-proclaimed made man who was both a former sheriff and later a wealthy bank financer. He and Geneva came from families that prided on the sweat and tears that made up the American dream. That is, until the night of November 18th, 1970, when an enduring enigma would be born in the town of Nashville.
Let's rewind the clock slightly. Now, the saga of Clarence and Geneva Roberts began during the dark days of World War II. Clarence cut a dashing figure in his army uniform and swept young Geneva off her feet. The couple were married shortly after they met and in time started a family that included 4 children. Over the years, Clarence hit his stride in business and the couple, along with their children, rose through Nashville's high society. Being one of Indiana's foremost socialites, Clarence was asked to join Nashville's chapter of the Freemasons. Now here too, Clarence seemed to excel, reaching the coveted 33rd degree amongst the inner workings of the Masons. As a result, he was awarded the 33rd Gold Band, a ring that became one of his most prized and valuable possessions. It was a symbol of his accomplishments and his status.
However, with prosperity also came the vice of overindulgence. To say the couple enjoyed the good life was an understatement. Among their many trappings of expensive finery were 3 luxury cars and a lavish estate. It was said that Clarence was so addicted to his over-decadent lifestyle that he would have done anything to keep it. But over the years, cracks started to appear in the carefully maintained facade of the rich and fabulous. What the people of Nashville didn't see was the growing amount of debt the Roberts were slowly falling into. The pressures of trying to keep up his playboy exterior seemed to take a heavy mental toll on Clarence. Among his close circle of friends, he was described as being almost bipolar. One minute, bright and cheery. The next, panicked and angry. By the mid-1960s, Clarence decided to sell his share and his brother's flourishing hardware business in order to make a risky gamble on 2 real estate investments.
Unfortunately, by early 1970, it was clear to Clarence that the real estate venture was doomed to fail. With the bills piling up and the collectors knocking at his door, Clarence Roberts knew that he was in trouble. His debts were being called in, his bank accounts were being seized, and even his cars were being repossessed. The Roberts were slowly but surely losing everything. According to his brother Carson and his nephew Bobby, Clarence had fallen into a deep depression and seemed almost suicidal to their eyes.
It is here that we finally arrive on the night of November 18th. The Nashville Fire Department is summoned to a raging blaze that was roaring out of control in a barn behind the Roberts residence. The firefighters failed to extinguish the flames and stood by as the barn was burned to the ground. When the dust settled and the debris cleared, they discovered a lone body in the ruins, burnt beyond all recognition. It was later identified as the body of Clarence Roberts. Along with the body, a melted shotgun was also found. To County Coroner Jack Bond, the picture couldn't be any clearer. He believed it to be an open and shut case of clear suicide. Bond summarised that, due to his destitution, Clarence had simply taken his own life. But no sooner had Clarence's charred remains been rushed off the premises than the questions began to mount. It was found that there was no gunshot wound on his body, and later, Clarence's 33rd gold band ring was found in the rubble, completely undamaged by the fire. Rumours began circulating through the town that the ring had been planted in the rubble and that Clarence's apparent death was not what it seemed.
This wasn't all, however. When digging deeper into the Roberts' unfiled paperwork, it was discovered that Clarence had purchased several insurance policies in the case of his death, totaling a staggering $1.1 million. When additional tests were run on the burnt body, it was found that it contained type AB blood, while Clarence was known to have type B. People began to ask the question, if the body was not that of Clarence Roberts, then who died in the fire of November 18th? Later, witnesses began to come forward with eyewitness testimony that many of them had seen Clarence frequenting several bars 2 nights before his supposed death. In one of these bars, he was seen befriending a vagrant man, chatting him up and buying him several drinks. Now, according to some sworn affidavits, the vagrant matched the approximate height and age of Clarence Roberts. It was overheard that Clarence had offered the man some work and odd jobs around the family barn, and even offered him a ride to check out the property. As the 2 men were leaving, the vagrant seemed to collapse from some unknown malady. When the bar patrons offered to help, they were dismissed by Clarence, who said that he alone would take the man to the hospital. When county records were later checked, it was found that no man fitting the vagrant's description was ever admitted to any of the adjoining hospitals. It's here we start to form a dark scenario of what may have happened the night of November 18th in the year 1970. Now, is it possible that Clarence Roberts, in an effort to climb out of his debt and start a new life, faked his death by replacing his body with that of an unknown drifter? This started a deep rift within the townspeople, some firmly believing that Clarence Roberts was a cold-blooded killer who faked his own death, while others deny that he was ever capable of such a crime.
In any case, Geneva Roberts, now alone, was left to put the pieces back together. Over the years, she became a recluse, her once lavish fortune falling into squalor. When questioned by police, Geneva staunchly maintained that her husband had died that tragic night in 1970. To add validation to her claims, a prominent pathologist and a close friend of the Roberts family, a man named John Pless, firmly believes that the evidence firmly points to Clarence Roberts perishing the night of November 18th. The outlandish claims that Clarence had murdered a wandering vagrant in order to fake his own death were nothing more than fabricated conspiracy cooked up to smear the Roberts name. Nevertheless, Geneva was left to fight the daunting insurance claims by herself in a series of battles that she sadly did not win. Her legal wrangles with the insurance companies left Geneva financially ruined. To support herself, she moved away to the outskirts of Nashville and took an entry-level job at a local restaurant. It was during this time that strange rumours and sightings began around the old farmhouse that Geneva now lived in. Local shopkeepers confided that Geneva began to purchase large quantities of beer and alcohol. Even though she herself was a diabetic and seldom, if ever, drank such libations. Passers-by frequently reported that a man was often seen lurking in and around the secluded farmhouse. This man, whoever he was, seemed to go to great lengths in order to keep hidden from anyone that ventured onto the property. The rumours reached such a fever pitch that Clarence Roberts had somehow returned. Law enforcement in the area decided to set up a lengthy surveillance on the property of Geneva Roberts. Yet, despite this, they found nothing. Even though they came up empty, many of the on-duty police were convinced that a man seen around Geneva Roberts' farmhouse was indeed her supposed dead husband, Clarence. A local reporter, who had grown friendly with Geneva over the 10 years since Clarence's supposed passing, was herself convinced that Geneva was hiding something. The reporter commented that whenever she would go to visit Geneva, the older woman would never invite her inside the house. In fact, she was adamant that no one was to enter her home at any time.
Whatever she was or wasn't hiding, Geneva Roberts lived out the next 10 years in isolated and quiet seclusion, careful to never draw too much attention to herself. That is until one hot, muggy night in the year 1980, exactly 1 decade since the fire that changed her life. Once again, the local fire department is summoned to an out-of-control blaze on the outskirts of town. Perhaps unsurprisingly, it was the home of Geneva Roberts. When investigators sifted through the ashes, they again, perhaps predictably, discovered the body of Geneva. However, unlike last time, there were now 2 bodies recovered from the rubble. Incredibly, the second body is once again identified as that of Clarence Roberts. This time, the fire was proven to be that of arson, as clear indications of an accelerant were present throughout the incinerated site. Whether or not the second body was really that of Clarence Roberts, police were now certain of one thing: that Geneva had been murdered. And so the mystery of Clarence Roberts had been born. Clarence and Geneva's 4 sons tried in vain to accurately locate the location of the body that had been recovered in the first fire of 1970, but could never get the grave exhumed. Is it at all conceivable that a man could die twice? Now, almost half a century later, the little town of Nashville, Indiana, still doesn't have an answer.